the conflicts paragraph. Members of the committee or of the board are advised of their duty under the State Government Ethics Act to avoid conflicts of interest. In the appearance of conflict, are instructed to refrain from participating in any matter coming before this board with respect to which there is a conflict of interest or appearance of conflict. If there are any now or any arise during the meeting, please speak up.
And Steve, if I just might remind the members that this is live streamed on YouTube.
All right, we'll watch our language then, Peter. Well, we'll just work through the agenda that Jennifer has prepared for us today, and then there are a few, well, there are some housekeeping things or some procedural matters as far as our committee is concerned that a few of us have talked about in terms of how we will do our work of previewing articles and giving feedback, input via email. And we've set up a sort of an interim method by which we can have a meeting between email and our first reactions to articles and our next quarterly meeting. So we'll go through that a little bit. And then if we have time, I want to talk about the category of cases where we, category of articles where we have specific areas of practice, and to what extent should the journal be involved in publishing articles about specific areas of law, whether it be family law or trust and estates or some more arcane area of law that someone has written what they may think is an interesting and stimulating article, and we may not, but just generally talk about whether we want to practice, whether we want to publish specific practice area articles. So without further ado, Jennifer, do you mind taking it from here?
I hope you've all had a chance to just go over what I've proposed for the summer 2021 edition. We've had some latecomers to the discussion, and those are under the further review needed section. So are there any questions about what's proposed for summer 2021? If not, then I'd say let's jump to the further review needed, because the CLE article and the one that I just sent you last week, I just want to about the Mecklenburg County COVID response. I just want to verify that that would be something that we want to include in the summer edition. So
Jennifer,
yeah.
I've got to say this. I'm really concerned about the death penalty article that Jim Exum wrote. We need to tread lightly. I mean, I agree with everything he wrote, but we need to tread lightly with that legislature over there. And we need to watch controversial articles. And that's controversial. What, you know, whether you're for or against it, it's a controversial situation that we need to watch out for. We really need to do that. I've had my say.
Can I ask a question about that? Does it help if we have a section, like if we create a section that is opinions, like articles that express opinions, or just stay away from it altogether? Because this is going to come up, and it does come up periodically, where we have controversial articles and we always struggle with them. And I don't know how to overcome that.
We're going to run into a letter to the editor situation, which is one thing we tried to stay away from, because you're going to have people who are going to want the other side written about, and it's going to go back, forth. Mm-hmm. I just think it's bad policy, and especially with Keller lurking.
Yeah.
to be publishing something like that. Again, I don't have any objections to what he wrote about,
Mhm.
but the problem is, it is a controversial issue.
I'm not sure where to go with that. We do have a statement at the beginning of the journal that says that articles contained are opinions of the authors and not necessarily the opinion of the state bar. I don't know if that's a blanket statement that covers us well enough, if it's something that needs to be repeated at the end of certain articles, perhaps, just to reinforce that point. We've certainly had controversial articles in the past that we knew would bring out strong opinion, and sometimes in the hopes that somebody would express that opinion in the form of an article that we could publish as a counterpoint in a future edition. So where do we go with this article?
I mean,
Go ahead, Andrea.
I think it would be helpful if, as a board, we kind of formulate some policy, because like I said, it has come up in the past, it's going to come up in the future, where we have articles and we have addressed them as it relates to the legislators and whether or not they're going to react favorably or unfavorably to it. And I know we have to maintain our reputation, or I guess our not reputation, but we have to maintain our relationship with them. So I'm sensitive to that. I just feel like as a board, we might need some guidance or come up with some kind of policy on how to handle or weed out these articles if we have concerns about them, because otherwise, in the future, if we don't have Darren or somebody to flag it, they're going to get through. So if we have some guidance, I think that would be helpful to me.
Well, right or wrong, I've tried to stay as unopinionated about some of this stuff or not, because being an officer, I just don't think that's my place. But at some point in time, if nobody else is going to speak up, I'm going to speak up. And you know, we have legislation that we're working on at the legislature. And we always have that cloud over there that, I said cloud, not crowd, over there. You know, there's always a pending bill over there about changing our regulatory authority. These are just, you know, they're just not articles appropriate for a regulatory body. I'll just put it that way. They're appropriate for the NCAJ. They're appropriate maybe even for the Bar Association, but for the regulatory body of the North Carolina State Bar, they're not appropriate for our magazine.
Should we, Darren, should we have some overall policy about having articles that advocate for a change in legislation if the legislation is not about our regulatory stuff? And it could be, it could be anything. The domestic lawyers, somebody could write about alienation of affection or some other law that they think ought to be changed. And you know, while it might be appropriate to have some discussion, we may need a policy that addresses those things so that we're not giving the appearance that we're taking political positions and get out of our Keller lane and get ourselves in the jam.
I like the idea of having some kind of policy so that in the future we can kind of categorize these articles.
I looked all over for our policy. I've had it in the past, and with our fire, I don't know, my computer being changed, I don't know where it is, but is there any way we could get the policy back? I looked, I thought it was in the general information from last January, but I couldn't find it. But I wanted to take a look at that because I wanted to address, you know, whether or not there's something in our existing policy or not. I haven't read it in a while.
I'd like
Marcy?
to hear from
Okay.
Peter or Alice on whether or not this article runs afoul of Keller. It hadn't occurred to me until Darren brought it up, but to the extent what we write about is germane to the administration of justice, that's where it seemed to me this article comes down. This is a well-respected former chief of the Supreme Court whose views have evolved over time, and it's scholarly, and I just see it as right on point with what we want to be doing. And I don't disagree. I agree with Darren that you may create a counterpoint situation, but I don't think it's, as Darren said, back and forth, back and forth. If this generates a response, then great. I think that's what we want to be writing and who we want to be about. But, you know, we do law. That's what we do.
Steve,
Marcy, I think Marcy's had her hand up for a little bit.
I was just wondering, we're so careful with our legislative committee that we stay in our lane. And I think what Darren is saying is that we should use sort of the same filter. I think that's what you're saying, Darren, the same filter when it comes to articles in the journal. So what's the difference? I mean, we're so careful that we don't advocate legislation that the Bar Association should be advocating or somebody else. It's not in line with what we do. So I don't know. And
Well, I don't know that the bar journal should, its purpose should be to invoke conversation about controversial issues. I don't know that that's our job. That's not a regulatory situation. And Peter and I have had this conversation. I'm just very worried that we're going to stick ourselves into a lawsuit at some point in time on one of these articles, and we need to be more careful with what we're doing. And you couldn't ask for a more controversial issue right now than the death penalty. And, you know, I think it's starting to lean the right way in terms of Justice Exum's article, but you know, still there's a tremendous amount of support still out there for that. And you know, I always loved hearing Gray say bold and wet, but at some, you know, we can't be, you know, we just got to watch out. I mean, we're just getting too far off the rails on that.
But doesn't that then, if we look at the rest of our articles on the agenda, you know, for today, I mean, couldn't we then say that we shouldn't publish half of these? The Confederate monuments, that's a controversial topic. The Justice Incubator, that could be viewed as a controversial topic. I mean, at what point do we become so afraid of saying things that people and you, all of you are lawyers. I'm not even a lawyer. Y'all are lawyers. And, you know, talking about the death penalty one way or another, I mean, I guess I definitely don't understand. And I'm not naive. I'm just saying, I don't understand this conversation. There you go. That's what I'm going to say about that.
Don't we usually, Alice, I see you're on here, but a lot of times when we have questions about Keller, we get Catherine Jean to look at it and kind of give us her thoughts because she's been so deep in that case. Darren, I heard you express two things. One is Keller and the other is alienating some people in the legislature, which is a whole different issue. It's a whole different issue. But Keller, in terms of that, I would think that we could and maybe should get Catherine Jean to look at it. Alice?
I know Alice and Brian are both on and both are well versed in Keller.
I didn't see, Brian, but yeah.
Barbara, yeah, I think that would be fine to do that. And I guess one thing I don't know the answer to is, this is not a new issue for the state bar, but I'm gathering, Jennifer, there's no written policy that we've had previous policy that's addressed this. So I think it might be wise to ask Catherine the legal parameters for a journal of a mandatory bar organization and on the Keller issue. I'm sort of inclined to think that there's two issues that we're talking about here and we're conflating them. One is whether there's a Keller problem. And the Keller problems that I've seen has been where a mandatory bar has actually endorsed a political point of view, endorsed a particular legislation, and they've gone on record in their publication as endorsing that. And I think that's really different than simply providing a platform for, you know, well-researched, articulated, and written articles that may take a point of view on matters that relate to the law. And I think Colin's comment about, well, is that going to apply to like an article about family law issue? So I think it would make a lot of sense to get Catherine's office to provide a legal opinion on what are the parameters for the articles in the journal. I think the second question there is one about, you know, is it simply not smart of us to publish articles that may antagonize folks that, you know, we rely on their kind of goodwill and good attitude towards the state bar. And I think that's a different issue. And maybe to start with the Keller issue is the best place to start. That puts you in kind of an odd place for this next issue of the journal, I gather, because I think Camille's point is well taken. You know, where is the line? Where is the line between possible endorsement or advocacy? And I don't know that it's clear when it comes to the law, and which is, you know, our bread and butter. Where are we going to say the line is? So,
well, you could discuss that latter issue and make a decision just subject to Catherine Jean's review on the Keller issue. I mean, just as a way of moving forward, not having to wait.
Mm-hmm. And Jennifer, just to be sure, I understand you're not aware of there ever having been a written policy on this kind of issue.
No, we have a policy, and it came out years ago because Jennifer, I just keep wanting to say Jennifer Garner because I just watched a movie with her, but Jennifer, who's of council and on the lamp board.
Jennifer Porter.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just drawing a blank there. COVID vaccine. She looked into it and it opened a whole can of worms years ago. And that's how it came part of our policy. We had a deep discussion about Keller. It's probably been at least a decade ago. So I think that's in our policy and I haven't read it in a while. I'll email it to everyone. So we've talked about Keller. I think it comes up probably every other board meeting. Keller comes up. So I think we're well aware of it and steering clear of that. And I do think this article, in my opinion, steers clear of it just because he states his former opinion, his current opinion, and it's certainly his opinion and not ours. And so I think the bigger issue is the issue of the legislature and publishing things that they may not like to read. So we can have Catherine review the article and I'll look at the policy again and she can review the policy and we can look at it, you know, assuming that she says it's okay. But I think the thing that we need to decide here is, you know, the legislative arm of this question.
If you could distribute that policy to all of us, that'd be good too, Jennifer.
Yeah, I will.
Maybe one way to deal with the worried about the legislature is to get someone to write the other side, is to hold it from the summer edition, get somebody to write the other side and publish both of them at the same time.
Yeah, we've done that in the past with controversial articles. I want to say this too. It's as a board member, when we look at articles, we look for whether or not they're written well, they're and they are good topics, hot topics. And as Camille said, you know, basically we're looking at it from that angle, and we're not necessarily, when we read articles, asking ourselves, is this going to insult the legislator, or is it going to ruin our relationship with them? And so personally, I feel like when we've had the discussions about relationships, it's been with the executive board, people like Darren and in the past, Colin and, others, where you were kind of putting the brakes on it, and Peter too, I think has been involved in the past, where they've said, no, we can't do this because it can interfere with our relationship. And that's something that we don't think about when we're saying publish or not publish. And that being the case, I almost feel like we need direction from the executive board to let us know whether we should pull an article. Like, let us decide freely, in other words, but let us know if we have to pull an article because of the greater good. But for the board to be the ones to decide whether an article is going to be offensive or not is going to be difficult, because we're not looking for that when we read these articles.
Well, Margaret, did you still have a comment?
Yes, I do. I have a comment and a question. To me, controversial is a little bit like that famous quotation about, I don't know what pornography is, but I know it when I see it, or art. I mean, some issues are controversial for some people and not for others. And so I guess I'm following up on a little bit on what Camille said. If we avoid everything that appears controversial to somebody, I don't know what's left to talk about, really. Mom and apple pie. So that's just my comment on that. Then the other question, and maybe this was before my time, but when we had like a guest editorial, if it's billed as guest editorial, that to me, it's the same thing as a newspaper. That removes it from the publication, that makes it definitely not the publication's official point of view. Even the News and Observer runs very conservative pieces. So, which often disagree with its own editorial policies or editorial statements. So I don't know why we don't allow some sort of editorial. It's not the board's opinion or the state bar's opinion, it's the writer's opinion. But maybe I missed something from long ago, which I certainly could have.
It seems that we need to be careful. I agree we can't avoid everything that's controversial, but we need to be not in a position where it appears as though we're endorsing something and get out of our Keller lane. If Catherine can give us good direction and we know that what we're doing is appropriate from that standpoint, then there's a way to offer differing points of view and that sort of thing. But I want us to be careful that we're not giving the appearance that we're endorsing political points that gets us in trouble and gets us involved in unnecessary litigation.
If I can offer just a quick clarifying thought, one of the issues we run into is the use of mandatory dues to publish the journal. Even though it may not be our endorsement, we're still using mandatorily collected money to fund the publication of the article. And so that's where the Keller issue comes in. But where the line is drawn is something that the Keller court recognized. Kind of some of the explicit language of the opinion says that where are we going to draw that line is not easy to discern. And I guess fortunately for them, they were dealing with very obvious issues. There was some articles about nuclear weapons and gun control that were not reasonably related to the regulation of the profession. And that was the language from the Keller court. Even though it may be controversial, it may be politically ideological, if it is reasonably related to the regulation of the profession, I think you have, I guess, at least more of an argument for being Keller appropriate. But when where exactly that's going to fall and whether that's going to generate some sort of controversy, I guess just amongst the membership is another question, unless you provide people with an opt-out. That was one of the solutions that was proposed by the Keller court, that essentially folks that would not want to support those activities could opt out. I don't know if that's something that we've ever considered for our journal, that people could essentially opt out of, the $3 that might come out of the overall budget that support the journal, but that could be some sort of solution to look into. But nevertheless, I just wanted to clarify that's one of the parts that we're looking at here, mandatorily collected dues supporting, or I guess being used to publish these different opinions.
All right. I feel pretty comfortable with the whole Keller argument and where we stand with this article, and I can have Catherine review it just to make 100% certain, but it is related to the law, and it is definitely the author's opinion and not our opinion. So I think we're good to go as far as that is concerned. So I think, again, the only issue that we're looking at is the legislative issue.
I've always felt that we should be somewhat fearless, and whether it's our brethren in the legislature or our brethren in other parts of the state where we don't live, or whomever, that we should have entertaining and interesting and well thought through articles like this one is. And I just think we're on a slippery slope to pablum if we just decide we've got to always have something that's not going to generate discussion.
Old and wet.
I've got to jump off in just a minute, but I agree. I don't think that should necessarily stop us, as long as we are making it clear it's his opinion. So.
I'm looking at the next couple things on our agenda, which are diversity and parental alienation, and
gerrymandering.
Right.
Not gonna make anyone happy.
We're not going to make anyone happy. So
Yeah, Steve, while I might have concerns on some things or would want things looking closer, I think at the very least, something at the beginning or end of these articles that to at least make it clear that these are individual opinions, I think would go at least, some way to helping, because it's, and I don't think that solves the ultimate problem, because if there's a problem, because like Brian said, it's not necessarily the content that's the issue. It's that you're having to pay to have this be shared with other people. And so even if you know it's someone's opinion, someone is paying their dues to have it be published. So it's more of a compelled speech thing that, we at some point we'll have to look at. But I think I know that we say something at the beginning, but I don't think anybody's reading the masthead and all of the little stuff that we put in it. And so if we have something clarifying when we have these guest articles, might help.
I can certainly add that to just where we deem it perhaps necessary on some of these more controversial ones. I don't think it has to go at the end of like the book reviews and like some of our other fluff pieces, but something that is maybe more, offering a strong opinion on a hot topic. We can certainly take that statement from the beginning of the journal and put it like after their bio paragraph or something like that at the end of the article. Is that what we're?
Yeah, and even maybe even in there saying, if you have, if you would like to submit something, related to this topic, we welcome all submissions and those kinds of things too. So make it clear that people could submit an opposing view.
Do we limit the size to keep them small enough so that we can do that, or do we have? I'm embarrassed. I don't know the policies about that, but it seems like if we limited them shorter, then we could offer more opportunity to more people to express their feelings about things, and be more of as opposed to one big long article. It might be a year before you can get another spot in to have a different point of view.
Yeah. We used to always do like point counterpoint in the same edition, and then it just became difficult to sometimes we'd have a great article but couldn't find anyone to write the counterpoint. And then you go, well, do we let this great article go just because we can't find an author? And that's just because we don't know everybody who might have a strong opinion on a particular article. But once you publish it, I don't get a lot of feedback on the journal. It's actually I can probably count on one hand in the 20 years how many times I've gotten a letter to the editor. But I mean, occasionally you will have somebody come out of the woods that says, hey, I have a strong counter opinion to this, and I would like to submit something. And we absolutely encourage them to do that. You know, we just can't always think of a counterpoint author because we're just a small bunch of folks here trying to put our heads together. But I can absolutely put a statement in as well. We've done it before saying, you know, if you would like to express your opinion on this topic, and I can put my email in there. No problem. Alice?
I don't know how to raise my hand. I guess I just found it. Yeah, I think, you know, you do run into the potential problem that, and we've seen this in the comments that we've gotten about our diversity inclusion initiatives, where we've gotten some pretty sort of rant-like responses and comments. And we don't want the quality of the publication to decline in order to satisfy this desire to have a point counterpoint. So whatever statement is there needs to be clear that it's subject to meeting the quality requirements and, you know, the research requirements and all of that that are our standard for any article that appears in the journal. We wanted, and I guess, Jennifer, one question I have, because it seemed to me at some point there was this issue about letters to the editor, and a decision was made that really wanted to discourage that. I think, Colin, what you're talking about is really more like a letter to the editor kind of format that would enable people to do like short responses. And we've never really had letters to the editor. And maybe, Jennifer, you can remind me of what the history of that has been.
Yeah, we've only had a few, but I don't recall that we've ever published one. Not that I can think of. And the only time that it really came up as a controversy was many years ago. Somebody had a dispute about an article, and I can't even remember what, it was the appointment of judges. And somebody wrote a letter to the editor basically wanting to argue the article. And at that point, Tom decided that we weren't going to get into like a back and forth argument with this individual in the pages of the journal, and instead invited him to come and meet with the, at that time, publications committee to discuss his discontent with the article that we did run. And like I said, I can't remember what the whole background of it was, but it wasn't that he wanted to write a counterpoint piece. He just wanted to argue that we had published it to begin with. And there was just no point of getting into a back and forth discussion in print.
Yeah, Alice, I don't think we ought to be getting letters to the editor, and we ought not to foster that. But I do think that there might be people who would write a well-written and reasoned piece on, you know, the election or the appointment of judges or the death penalty or any number of issues like that might be out of our regulatory range, but might be interesting and informative and helpful to thoughtful, provoking to lawyers, which I don't have, like I say, I don't have the big heartburn about the topic matter as much as just making sure that we don't step on the Keller lines and get ourselves in trouble. And I think we can manage the other part, and by limiting the length of them and offering an opportunity to other well-written publication of other well-written articles to address multiple sides of a particular issue.
Well, if there's no further discussion, it sounds like review the article for Keller, and providing that passes muster, go forward and add some statements at the end. Is that what I'm hearing? Sound good? Everyone nod. Yes, Jennifer, sounds great. Okay. All right, so we've made it past our first bullet point. Anything else in the summer 2021 edition that we need to discuss? All right, then let's move on to the further review needed articles. Do we want to talk about this age of social distance DEI checklist right now, or do we want to just continue tabling that? Do we have thoughts about this?
So this is an article that the Publications Committee requested this topic, and I volunteered to reach out to an author. So I'm the one that solicited this article, and the authors, check in with me every quarter to see what the status is. And so I would like to tell them something other than the committee puts it off every quarter. I mean, if the committee has voted against it, I'm fine with that. I would like for maybe the chair of the committee or for Jennifer to reach out to the authors to say we're declining to publish your piece, rather than being the one to request that they write it, not have a reason to tell them why we're not going to publish it. And then I would obviously talk to them as well, but I don't know what to tell them because I don't know what's wrong with the article. We said, will you write an article about diversity and inclusion? Will you give us tips for, we actually use the word checklist in our committee meeting. And so that's the word I used with the author was, would you give us a checklist of how lawyers can work towards better diversity and inclusion efforts in their law offices? So authors did what I asked them to do. I don't really know what to do at this point.
Okay. I know that there were just like some people that were for the article and some people against the article. Maybe you've had a chance to review it prior to the meeting and we can take a vote on it at this point. Now that everyone's had.
I would just like to say, I thought it was a good article and I'm sort of for publishing. The only thing that gave me a little heartburn was in the checklist, if we're encouraging lawyers to ask people to open up and be more forthcoming, is that viewed then in some circumstances as prying into the personal lives of colleagues where you don't belong? And I don't know the answer to that. That was one thing that jumped out at me, the opportunities to connect and the practice candor parts of it, which can be maybe tweaked editing wise to make it seem less like invasive into a colleague's private life, or suggesting that we should do that. But I think that's a problem with inclusion discussions generally. I mean, there's a kind of fine line, to my mind, in the real world.
What was the resistance to the article? I mean, I read it. It's not bold and wet, but it is what Camille asked for.
I just remember
What
one
the committee
comment.
asked for. No,
Yeah.
I relayed the voice of the committee. Let's just be clear.
Right.
I can't remember specifically. I just remember somebody saying like they didn't like the checklist. Maybe that was Steve and that was your comment and you're reiterating that now. I don't have the emails in front of me to say who specifically said what, but it just seemed like there were like some yeses and some nos and not everybody responded. So then I'm sort of like, well, I've got half the board responding and they're half and half, and I don't know what the rest of the board thinks. So then I kind of go, I don't know what to do with this.
So why don't we take a vote?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. Show of hands. Do we want to just do like a show of, and I don't know, like Alice and Colin, you probably haven't read these pieces because you're not on the editorial board. So we can take a vote.
Can we do one of the polls that Peter puts up?
That would be good.
Peter, can you do one of your polls?
Yep, I'm doing it right now.
Thanks, Peter.
Wait a second, I can't find how to do it.
It should have just popped up on your screen, Steve. Did you see it pop up somewhere?
I see the poll, but I don't see how I click yes or no.
It might be because you're a co-host. If I remove you as a co-host, you might
Oh,
be
wait,
able to
I don't
vote.
get to vote. Does the chair vote? Not until.
Not typically, no, I suppose. Yeah.
You vote when we do our emails. So, hey, there's Mark driving.
Hey, I'm listening, but I'm in the car, so I've been muted, but I'm looking for the poll as well. Oh, here we go. I've just submitted it. Sorry.
Thanks, Mark.
So it's at 8-2 right now, yes, to publish.
All right, then we'll call that a go. Thank you all. All right, so the next one is the article that Robin Morades submitted about lawyer competence and professionalism being correlated. Again, got some good feedback and some not so great feedback, and so I wanted you all to take a review. Again, didn't hear from everybody, so now's your chance to give us your opinion. Do we need to have a discussion about this? Is there something in particular that somebody had a problem with that maybe the author needs to address?
The objection I remember is there a line where LAP gets into lawyer wellness as opposed to helping lawyers in trouble? Where is that line?
And I was one of the ones who spoke about a concern about the article. And my concern was that, that it seemed to discount the idea of wellness a little bit, which I know is not a LAP position, but that was a little bit my concern, because it does seem that there's a good focus these days on lawyer wellness, and that there are things that lawyers can do to help their wellness, like, yoga, mindfulness, good eating, whatever. And by tying those into the article and saying yoga, wellness, and good eating are not going to solve addiction or burnout problems, or truly high level stress problems, that you might need LAP help for, it made me wonder whether it would be seen as, oh yeah, that whole wellness movement, there's nothing really to that. And that was my only concern. I wondered if maybe Robin could tweak the article a little bit to say, we understand wellness is an important discussion, and we're not opposed to wellness tips, ideas, etc.
Yeah. I think if you picked up on that, Camille, then I don't think, when 30,000 people, because everyone's going to read it, when 30,000 people read the article, there are going to be people who pick up on that the way that you picked up on that. And I have to imagine that is not her position. And so if it's coming across to people as perhaps their position, then yeah, I would say she does need to clarify that. Like, wellness is great, but here's another option if these, tips and tricks don't work, sort of thing. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Because it is important. And she works with Laura, who writes the wellness column for it. It's how I found Laura, was through Robin. And
Right.
So I know she's supportive of it and is, embraces that and practices, I know she practices yoga and she does other things herself and meditation. So I know she knows that's important. So I'll address that with her. And if there's were there any other concerns with her piece? If we once we address that, seems to be an easy sort of fix, and then we can move forward. If everyone's agreed. Sounds good?
Yep.
All right. All right, I'll talk to Robin about that. That's no problem. All right, our next article up for discussion. Judge Dietz's CLE article. Oops, Andrea, you're muted.
I pulled that for discussion only because I just felt like it begged for a counterpoint. And I think we talked about the fact that the CLE board is addressing some new policies. I can't remember if it was this committee, but it was a committee where this was brought up. And if we're going to publish this, is it a good time to ask somebody, like whether it's the CLE committee, somebody in that committee, or someone else to give a different perspective, because this is very derogatory to CLE, the CLE program. And personally, I don't agree with a lot of what he said. I don't want to write an article, but I would like to see a counterpoint.
Did you think the rewrite helped it at all, Andrea?
Not for me. I mean, I think it's very opinionated, and I know a lot of the things that he's complaining about, some people feel, but I think that there's definitely another side to the story. You know, for example, you know, when he talks about these private companies trying to get money and just make a buck from CLE. I mean, we're intelligent, I would like to think, as a profession, and we can make decisions on what we think is a good quality CLE versus not. And, you know, that's just one reaction I had to it. And another one is I've been one who has benefited greatly from CLEs through the years. So again, I'm not saying I want to write the article, but I do think that to put something that negative out there about our CLE program is harsh, and it would be nice to have something, a counterpoint that's written timely. But I can live with it if everybody, you know, wants to publish it. I just wanted to say that.
Darren, you had objected to that. If you don't mind expounding on your objection, if you're with us. I see you not in face, but
I don't know if I have good enough cell service or not. I'm way up in the mountains trying to pick up a car for my daughter.
I can hear you fine.
I mean, I had a real problem with it at the beginning, because I just thought it was I didn't think it was true. And like Andrea, I think that it is written from the standpoint of someone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. It's written from the standpoint of somebody, as I understand it, who doesn't go to court. I mean, he's in the appellate court, but he doesn't sit in district court and watch. I mean, one of the things that just aggravated me was the fact that the law schools are doing enough practical skills work right now. They're doing enough practical skills that it's solving all the deficiencies in court. And that's from an individual that doesn't sit in district court and watch the deficiencies, because apparently it's not doing a very good job. And I've talked to people, some people in like Mecklenburg County who have a greater group of young lawyers who are coming through, and they're of the same opinion. I just had I mean, you know, you can be printed if you want it. I just think it's just so wrong. And it just grates on me, especially as one who's put together CLEs for 12 years. And you know, I don't know how you practice law and not go to CLEs. I really don't. I just don't understand it. And I don't, you know, I don't think that someone who hasn't been in our district courts very much can really write about it. That's my 2 cents. I'm going to get off this because I know it's too noisy.
This article definitely has sizzle, and we spent about a quarter of an hour talking about what the legislature might think about it. Here we've got a prominent appellate judge who's a rising star. He's probably headed for the Fourth Circuit, and he's written the article. He's rewritten it. He called me before he submitted it, I believe, to talk about it. And, you know, it was bold and wet enough for me to want to support it. I think it should be published. Is it controversial? Yes. Or is it negative in some respects? Well, yes, it is. But I think somebody can, the committee can respond to it later if they want to. But I think this is the kind of article that needs to have the attention of our readership.
This is Tom Anderson. May I speak?
Hi, Tom. Sorry, I see your hands up.
Yes. The reason I think it needs to be published is because of a sentence and a footnote that says there's no objective evidence that CLE helps. I agree with Darren. I wouldn't dream of practicing consumer bankruptcy law without going to my 12 hours of CLE every year. I don't know how you can do it and not take CLE. But I also recall that my wife reported to me when the Dispute Resolution Commission was getting ready to adopt mandatory CLE for mediators, that they did a survey around the country, and they also found that having mandatory CLE for mediators, or CME, whatever it's called, for mediators resulted in no difference in discipline or malpractice claims. And if there's no objective evidence for it, even though God knows I wouldn't have the courage not to take CLE, I think we ought to discuss that. And I think the way to do that is to publish his article and let people talk about it. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Peter, I know you're planning on submitting a sidebar sort of piece to this. And have you sort of fleshed out what that's going to be? And will it help address any concerns that we're talking about here?
Yeah, so I would first point out how appreciative I was of Judge Dietz being willing to talk to me and rewrite the article. I think he cleared up a lot of the factual inaccuracies in it. While there might be things that we just disagree with still, the things that were provably wrong, I think he listened and made the changes. And I just think to then not publish it after he took the effort to do that would be an insult. As far as a sidebar, I think having a paragraph or two just on the page, just giving an update on where the CLE board is on its review of its rules, because we just started a big study to look at all of our rules. Do we need to make big changes? And so just making it clear that we've already begun this process and that some of the things he's pointed out are things that we're going to be looking at, not necessarily a full article arguing each point or disagreeing, but just to know that this is something that, something that the bar is already in the process of reviewing. And so I think it's timely because of it. And I'd be happy to put that little sidebar in.
Okay.
That's all I think I would be looking for.
So this article kind of tees up some potential changes that are coming down the pipeline anyway, is what?
There's no guarantee on anything, but we're looking at everything. I mean, we're looking at credit hours, we're looking at course applications and different fees and changing the CLE reporting period. I mean, we're looking at a lot of different things. Really, everything's on the table. Yeah.
Okay.
Mark Enriquez has his hand up.
Oh, yep, he does.
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Camille. I do think we should publish it. I agree. I don't agree with a lot of the points made. I do appreciate the revisions and the clarification on accuracy, but I don't think we could. I mean, the whole idea to me of the journal is we're not stating the official opinion of the state bar. And if you have someone prominent writing a thoughtful article, even if it's critical, I think it's important that we publish it and allow the discussion of what CLE should be. I think it's very valuable. I don't agree, I'm not persuaded by the article, but that's, to me, that should not be our test. I think we should publish it. I like the idea of inviting discussion and dialogue, but if we stick to something everybody agrees with, I think we're pretty bland. It goes back to the discussion that I appreciated at the beginning around the death penalty article, but I think we do need to be willing to tackle difficult subjects, even if not everyone agrees. So I would vote to publish the DCLE piece.
Could we maybe encourage George Jenkins as the chairman to at least do a little informative note about what's going on with the CLE board and what they're currently doing and looking at that might dovetail with this, and say that, you know, these things are actively going on.
Yeah, I think that my sidebar that I write will be sent to George to sign off on, and it'll probably be a sidebar under his name, would be my thought. Yeah,
that'd be great.
Tom, do you still have your hand up?
No, sorry.
Oh, okay, sorry. I didn't know if that went away automatically or what, but I just want to make sure you weren't still trying to get recognized.
Nope. I'm good. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Do we
And
want to
I'll
go
talk too
ahead
much
and vote on this? It sounds like most of you are pretty favorable, especially in light of the fact that Peter's going to have this sidebar talking about some upcoming changes, maybe coming to CLE, being proposed by CLE.
The only thing that I would add is, you know, as working with someone, you know, working with a company that provides a lot of CLE, and I myself provide a ton of CLE hours a year, I really liked the article and I thought it raised excellent points that I happen to be in agreement with. So just a slightly different perspective. I vote to publish it because I really agree with it.
Good. All right. Should we?
Are you going to add at the end the same provision that you would to Justice Exum's article?
I can. Do we think this article requires the opinion
I
qualification?
would recommend that we consider putting that almost at the end of every article. But yeah, I mean, this would be another good one.
Okay. That's no problem. Thanks for raising that, Heidi. All right, do we want to, it sounds like we're all pretty much in agreement. Do we want to vote?
I don't think we need to. I think we've got consensus.
Okay, sounds good. Then let's try to move as quickly as we can through the rest of the agenda, so we have some time to do some brainstorming of new articles at the end. Alice, do you have a progress on the equal access to justice piece?
Well, they have finished their work and they have, it's a long report, but there's an executive summary. And I think that they would be thrilled to be able to publish, like maybe with an introduction, and the introduction could be from Justice Earls,
okay,
or even the Chief Justice for that matter, to publish like an introduction and then to publish the executive summary, or at least the most salient excerpts from that. I think they would embrace that greatly. Justice Earls is going to be addressing the council this Friday with the Chief Justice about the findings from the assessment. So I'd be glad to ask her how we, actually, let me go work through Jennifer Lechner, who is the ED for the Equal Access to Justice Commission, and ask her how they'd like to do that. But I can definitely get that ball rolling now. And I'm sure they could actually have something fairly quickly if you wanted to have it for the fall edition.
Okay, so the deadline for that would be August the 15th. No, what am I thinking? May the 15th.
May 15th? Okay, well, that might be a little soon.
No, yes, June 15th. I swear to God, I'm fog brained from COVID shot number 2. And I was like, when's our next meeting? And Charlie's joining me. So June 15th, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I will write off to Jennifer right away and see what I can find out and let you know, Jennifer.
Great, thank you. Andrea, this Justice McGee opinion. I've lost you. Is she here? Oh, there she is.
So I think we were just waiting for that to settle. That was hot off the press the last time we spoke. And I don't know that it's ready
Okay.
to be addressed yet, but I'll monitor that and maybe check and see. I think we were waiting to see if it got appealed.
Okay, gotcha. All right, moving on to Camille, the Regulating Change Committee.
So, you know, Mark Enriquez is chair of the committee. So if he disagrees, he will speak up and let us know. But I feel like he'll say it's not quite ready yet.
Okay.
I do think the committee is probably going to be working on a report this year.
Okay.
And probably sooner than later.
Okay. So June 15th would probably be a bit of a stretch. So maybe our next deadline, which would be in September, might work.
I think by June, we'll know whether we've got a report then
Okay.
that we could write on, or if we would need to, you know, bump it another quarter.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks. All right. Robert Rader. I think you spoke to him and he was considering it, and you're.
Yeah, I did. I've been twisting his arm, and I'm hoping that he'll give in. I think he will, but he hadn't committed yet.
Okay, no problem. I think Darren has disconnected. I don't see him. Gray, our Supreme Court Museum. Any changes here?
Until we emerge from pandemia, I just don't see any real progress that's going to be made here. The outgoing president, who I'm going to make him my former brother-in-law if he doesn't become more responsive, you know, has really stood fast with our current shutdown. And there's a new slate of officers coming in. I know some have seen that. And so I plan to pounce on the new president as soon as he gets sworn in, and then swear off my former brother-in-law.
Get him off that Christmas card list. All right, sounds good. Heidi, are there any updates to this NASCAR article? Is she gone? I don't
Heidi
see her.
dropped off. She had to go.
Okay, no problem. So I'll follow up with her. Margaret, our gerrymandering article. You're muted. Margaret, you're muted.
Sorry.
There you are. Thanks.
I think I sort of dropped the ball on that. Mary Wills Bodie practiced law in New York and then came back and worked on gerrymandering, and she took the North Carolina bar, I guess it was the end of February. So she was pretty busy. She's not so busy now, I think. So I will get back to her on that. And since then, there have been a few developments. I think there may be some different legislation coming up in this session. That's kind of the rumor. So we'll just see what happens. And Chuck McGrady would certainly be knowledgeable about that as well, even though he's not there. But I'll see what I can do to move that along.
Okay, great. Mark, our School of Government, an article about the Electoral College.
Mark.
Oop, now Mark disappeared. All right, we lost Mark. Steve, that leads us to you. The Moonshiners article.
Yeah, Tom mentioned our former colleague on the board. Tom, who was that you said knew one of the judges that wrote a bunch of decisions, and I should get a hold of him?
John Gehring.
John Gehring. I need to call John. Haven't done it.
Okay.
You know, John Willardson over in Wilkesboro or North Wilkesboro, he may.
Yeah, I did talk to John. I did talk to Willardson.
Okay.
And he wasn't deep in the weeds on it, so to speak, no pun intended. But I think I'll call John Gehring and see what he knows about that line of cases from Wilkesboro.
Okay.
Did you say Gehring?
Yes.
As in our former board member?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear from John again.
Yeah,
That's great. Okay, good. And then what about the committee studying diversity? I'm guessing there's no article coming forward anytime soon on that. They're still working.
that's me. Yeah. Well, we have decided to publish, not to publish, to bring to the full ethics committee the preamble version of that language. Or that's Todd is chairing. You're talking about the committee. Todd's chairing. Yeah, that's a different subcommittee. I can reach out to Todd on that, Jennifer.
Okay. All right. And that wraps up the agenda that I have published, and we're on to new article ideas. Who's got something bold and wet to propose? Everyone put their hands up at the same time. I don't know who to call on first.
I had a couple of suggestions.
Okay.
There are about, I guess, 25 or more cases pending under the revival of the statute of limitations with regard to child sexual abuse cases around the state, in state and federal court. A number of those have been referred to a 3-judge panel, and currently the Chief Justice has failed to appoint anyone to a single panel. But that's a huge piece of litigation. Some of the cases are in the appellate courts, our state appellate courts. There are stay orders pending around the state. But there's this huge proliferation of these cases, and I thought it might make for an interesting article if somebody wanted to focus on that. The other idea I had, and I can't remember the name of it now because he's written so many good and bad novels, is that John Grisham finally pumped out a novel that had a situs in North Carolina. And, you know, if somebody wanted to review that, that might provide a little local color.
Okay. I know we've tried in vain to try to get a interview with him. Okay.
He's definitely got a Chapel Hill connection. If somebody could grab him in a bar, and not being facetious, that's where I'm told he likes to hang out. I also like to hang out in bars, just not in Chapel Hill. So somebody might be able to inveigle him to do an interview, and then we could really revive and resuscitate John Gehring to the position he's always aspired to.
Yes. Golfing with John Grisham.
That's right.
Where his best interviews are conducted on the golf course. Okay. All right. I'll make note of that.
Greg, can you say a little more about the child sex abuse statute of limitation cases? What is that issue of that?
Well, these cases have normally been time barred by 3-year statutes with 10-year statutes of repose, and the legislature at the end of 2019 just passed a sheaf of new revival statutes, 4 or 5, and so you have claims now brought by people who were allegedly sexually abused 50 years ago. And in some cases, the abusers are already dead, so they're suing institutions. But it's an interesting dynamic because I think the General Assembly is very sensitive to protecting people that were treated in such fashion. But you have huge problems with evidence and proof, because if you think about people that were abused as children in 1970, and then you think about the adults who abused them, they're all dead. And all the records are gone, and all the people that were at not nursing homes, but children's homes and church facilities. Those are some of those that I've seen. They don't have any records, and all the people that work there are also dead. So, there's some complex issues there. All that's going to have to be sorted out by the appellate courts of this state. You got a federal judge who's state a case, just a way, you just kind of threw her hands up and said, I'm not touching this. Let the state courts figure that out. So at some point, that's going to have to be addressed by the judicial branch. And thanks to no one at the legislature for throwing that, in their lap. But that's got to be sorted out, and that's going to be a huge result, one way or the other.
Thank you.
Do you have an idea of somebody who could write kind of like sort of the overview that you just expressed and put that in an article?
I think so.
Okay. Then I'll let you follow up with that person.
I live for it.
Keeps you up at night. All right. Anyone else got some ideas for me?
I've just observed in my limited time on the bench, a lack of formality in court, in dress, or the lack thereof, or the choices that people make about what they wear and dress and how they address each other, lawyers, in their lack of professionalism and interacting with each other in court, in how they conduct themselves. I could not write the article because of my position, but I'd be glad to try to talk to somebody who might be able to write the article, but I find it very interesting.
I feel like this came up before when John Gearing was on the board, and he was talking about, yeah, some of the dress of clients. I think he even relayed a story of, like, somebody who was coming in for a drug charge that had on like a t-shirt, like talking about drugs or something. It was just like, this is not what you wear to court as a defendant.
I mean, there was an attorney, and I will not say who it was, but it was a female attorney who appeared in my courtroom in felony court. And she had on a dress, which I guess is a party dress. And when she sat down, that left nothing to the imagination, especially from my perspective on the bench.
It was like Basic Instinct 2.0 or something
I was
in
like,
the courtroom.
Interesting choice.
Wow. Okay.
Judge Bell, does it get worse on Zoom, or is it just not to do with virtual court?
Virtual court is all right. The only place I do virtual court is in 5A domestic violence, and we're just on WebEx for a short period of time, basically doing housekeeping things and motions to continue. Because right now, although if that bill passes, I guess we'll start doing contested hearings on WebEx. But right now, we just do you do ex partes on WebEx, which the remote judges really deal with that. And then I deal with like motions to continue and things like that on WebEx, but we don't really do hearings per se on WebEx. We make people come down, much to their chagrin. I never cease to amaze me how folks come on WebEx, and then they say, when I say, okay, come down to 5A, they say, I'm 2 hours away. And I was like, I'm not sure why, but we'll see you in 2 hours. We'll still be here. Meet us here. So anyway, it's interesting, but back in the day, I've been around for a little while, not as long as some of you, but longer than others, about 28 years. And back in the day, you just dressed a certain way coming to court. And, every once in a while, you might get somebody on a Friday afternoon who ran in to do something and were on their way out of town. And that's a little bit different. But there's just very lack of formality. And I thought I might have to break up a fight between some attorneys who were just talking to one another, just totally inappropriate. In court. Now they're saying some things that I probably said in my office about someone when I returned to the office, but not that I would say in court. So I don't know. I just think it might be an interesting article.
Let's put that on the list.
I wonder if the dress issue is going to be inflated by the fact that we've all kind of gotten more comfortable with being at home and wearing our athleisure attire, while we're working, because we're not always being, seen by everybody. And when we go back to the office or back to the courtroom or back to wherever, are people going to be pushing that boundary a little bit because they've just gotten used to a different, I mean, Colin's got his suit and tie on and he looks so nice. And I noticed Darren shows up to all of our meetings in a t-shirt. You know, it's just like everyone's just sort of taking liberties with their fashion choices this last year. So it'd be interesting to see how that translates once we go back, or since we have, in Julie's case, you've been back in court, and I'm wondering if there's been a shift a little bit, like pre-COVID and post-COVID.
I don't know, but it's not a good shift.
And I know it wasn't always great, but I wonder if it's gotten worse. You know,
I'm just trying to impress the guy at the bank to renew my note.
For that, it might be fun to get a plaintiff's lawyer and a defense lawyer to co-write an article.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'd be willing to try to find somebody. I'm glad to try to set it up. I just don't think I can write it with my current position.
Sure. Understood.
Go
All right.
ahead.
Well, I'll put that on our list of articles that we have in progress, and we'll see if we get somewhere this next quarter.
Okay.
And if not, we'll follow up next quarter and go from there.
Should I talk to some people and try to recruit somebody?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. That'd be great. And if you hit a dead wall, then maybe we can, next quarter, we can figure something out and explore further. Try to help you out.
Judge Bell, I was thinking it might be cool to have an article that's like your first 100 days, impressions from your first 100 days, the good and the bad, things that you've learned about it. Might be an interesting article from a new judge.
I like that.
And a new judge that came on during this whole pandemic, when courts are closed, not closed, you're on WebEx, which, I'm assuming pre-COVID you weren't on WebEx, and, having to learn technology and things like that.
I'd be glad to do something. I wasn't lobbying for that, but I'd be glad to say some things. I think the local bar was planning to get me to write something, and we didn't get around to it. But I'd be glad to do that if you want it. But there are several other judges who maybe I could cooperate with some of the new. There are a total of 4 now. I guess we're about to hear, or maybe have heard this afternoon, about the newest appointee to the district court bench. But there are, I think, a total of 5 now going to be new judges.
Mm-hmm. It might be interesting to see your observations and maybe, talk about what you thought it was going to be, and did it meet with the reality of what you're doing and things like that.
I'll take a stab at it.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. Yeah, always be, know that if you raise your hand on any given topic, you might be swooped in to write something yourself.
And
not
I was
to
doing
discourage
so well
anyone,
being
not to
quiet.
discourage anyone, but it's been known to happen. Sorry. All right. Anyone else have some new topics we should look at?
I had a suggestion. There is a group of paralegals in North Carolina who have put together sort of a project called Justice for All, and they've submitted their thoughts and sort of a proposal to a variety of bar associations and legal organizations across the state, talking about a limited licensed professional. And they presented to the State Bar Regulatory Committee a couple of weeks ago. And their presentation, I thought, was really good, and their materials, were great. And I thought maybe we could ask them if they wanted to turn their their formal presentation into an article.
I mean, I think that sounds great. And if you thought it was a well-done presentation, then I would say that definitely.
Yeah, absolutely do that. That's right up our alley.
Okay. Yeah, I would say move forward on that.
I was there for that, as was Alice. You were there, right? Brian, were you there for that? Yeah.
And I, just to be clear, I watched it afterwards. I wasn't there when y'all were there. So Brian might be scratching his head and saying, Camille wasn't at that meeting, but I watch the whole thing afterwards.
That was one of our most popular videos, Camille. We
I
have over
know.
400 views of that particular meeting.
I know.
Wow, that's awesome. That's really great.
I think it would make a good article. I wonder if it might be good to pair it with the one we're talking about, the regulatory change and what that committee's doing. Because you talk about controversial for lawyers, that issue could be very controversial. I don't think it's one we have to steer clear of for Keller reasons by any means, but it might be good to have it sort of framed around what the regulatory change committee is looking at and the purposes of that investigation. The folks that made the presentation were very knowledgeable and articulate and have thought through their proposal quite well. So I imagine you'd get something pretty well written for the journal.
I see Marcia's got her hand up. Marcy.
I want to thank you for letting me hang out with you guys today. This has been very interesting. I just had a suggestion. Would it be a good idea on some of the topics that might have a Keller question to get the Office of Counsel to opine before somebody goes to the trouble of writing the articles? Just to be sure, for example, the gerrymandering, I don't know if it would or wouldn't violate Keller, but doesn't it, if there's some that you think might have a Keller implication, I feel really bad if you go out and solicit somebody to write an article only to have the Office of Counsel say, well, we probably shouldn't publish that. So I don't know, that's just a thought that I had sitting here listening. And it's so good seeing Gray today. Hi, Gray.
Special shout out.
I think for whatever that's worth, I think that's a good idea, Marcy, but I know it's hard to always tell, depending on what the article turns out to be, whether it's going to be a Keller issue. But maybe with the, I know we were talking about the policy and being able to just inform people that might be submitting something that these are considerations that we have, and here's the policy, kind of the parameters through which the board looks and views these articles. That might be helpful, just to kind of give everybody a heads up that if you're writing on something controversial or potentially political, even if it's regulated to the profession, again, that might still pass our Keller test, but just to be aware that that's something this board has to consider.
I just feel really bad. You go out and you solicit somebody to do something. They spend all these hours and hours writing an article and then only to be told that.
Right.
So anyway, just a thought. And I love Judge Bell's comments. Yeah, it's my soapbox too, because I'm a dinosaur. I've been around a long time, and just gets on my nerves when I see the way that people act and dress in a courtroom. So.
Hard to tell the litigants from the attorneys sometimes.
I just shake my head.
All right, anyone else have ideas for future articles? If not, then I guess we've wrapped up our work for the day.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate some great conversation with all my friends.
I will send everyone our policies, so you'll have a copy and you can share those with people that you're talking to, your potential authors, if you feel they need to see what our policies and guidelines are. So be expecting that in your inbox.
Okay, we'll look for some more articles. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks.